Have you ever been humiliated for being simple and wanted to show who you really were, just to silence the world? Donna Aurora, 63 years old, walked through the company corridors in her blue uniform, bucket in hand. Her steps were slow but firm. Her face was tired, yet serene, the kind of serenity only those who have cried a lot know how to maintain. While cleaning the tables, she heard muffled laughter. Here comes Grandma with the cloth. Careful not to trip over the relic. She pretended not to hear. She lowered her head, squeezed the cloth between her fingers, and continued. Silence was her form of resistance. When someone asked why she still worked, she always said the same thing. Work has never shamed me. Only character can do that. But inside, she carried a secret that no one imagined. Past that time and pain had covered with the dust of humility. One ordinary morning, everything changed. The company was bustling, preparing to receive an important visitor. A new investor was coming to close a multi-million-dollar deal. The employees hurried about, adjusting ties, polishing their words, and disguising their fears. Aurora did what she always did. She cleaned the floor where others had walked without looking. Until, suddenly, the elevator door opened. A tall, elegant man, surrounded by reporters, entered smiling. He walked confidently, greeting the director and executives. But, as he passed near the cleaning cart, he stopped. His smile changed. His eyes filled with astonishment and emotion. "Professor Aurora?" he asked, his voice trembling. Silence fell over the office. Everyone stopped. Aurora looked up, surprised. "You know me." The man smiled, with tears held back. "You taught me to read. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have gotten this far." The director's eyes widened. The young people, previously smiling, exchanged embarrassed glances. At that moment, Donna Aurora was no longer the cleaning lady. She was the teacher that destiny hid. And time decided to reveal. That day, everyone discovered who she was. But only she knew what she had to lose. To keep standing, before being Donna Aurora, the cleaning lady, she was Professor Aurora, a woman admired by students and colleagues, known for her patience and sweet voice that transformed even the most difficult lessons into stories of hope. For almost 30 years, she taught in public schools, believing that knowledge was the only way to free the poor from humiliation. The students called her Aunt Aurora. She knew each one by name, knew who had breakfast at home and who arrived on an empty stomach. When the little ones slept on their notebooks, she didn't complain. She just ran her hand through their hair and said, "Learn to dream, my child. It's the first step to learning to live." Her husband, Sue Osmer, was a bus driver. A simple, hard-working man who said she was the pride of the neighborhood. They had few luxuries, but many plans: to renovate the house, to travel someday, to live a peaceful old age. But fate, that which never asks if we are ready, decided to change course. It was a rainy night when the phone rang. On the other end, a trembling voice. "Mrs. Aurora, there was an accident with your husband's bus." The world went silent. Words made no sense. Aurora rushed to the hospital with her heart pounding, but it was too late. The man who made her laugh on Sunday mornings would not return home. That day, a part of her died and the other learned to go on. Over time, the bills began to pile up. Her teacher's salary barely covered the basics, and the pain left no room to teach with the same joy. She tried to stay strong, but the eyes that once shone with hope now only reflected weariness. And then came another blow. A health problem forced her to take time off. The savings ran out. The promises of help too. When she realized it, Aurora was alone, with calloused hands and her name crossed off the teacher's list. Time passed, and she had to do what many women do in silence. Start over from scratch, without sufficient retirement income, without a husband, without recognition. The only job she could get was as a cleaning assistant. At first, it hurt. It hurt to wear the uniform, to feel the sideways glances, to hear the former teacher now cleans floors. But she held her head high. Work is a blessing, not a shame, she told herself. And, little by little, she learned to transform the bucket and mop into instruments of dignity. One day, she was called to work at a large company, a private school, that had grown into a corporation. Ironically, it was the same building where she had taught 30 years before. Now, instead of holding a piece of chalk, she held a cloth, but her gaze was the same, sweet, patient, and full of wisdom. Some former students still remembered her. Others did not, and the young employees, full of haste and arrogance, found amusement in the lady who walked slowly, wore worn-out shoes, and always had a tired smile on her face. Aurora wasn't offended. She knew that time teaches better than any classroom. She knew that one day, those who mocked simplicity would have to learn what she already knew. No one is small for doing what is honest. In her few free hours, she liked to sit near the window of the small room she rented. She observed the street activity and thought about her former students. "Does any of them remember me?" she asked silently. And deep down, she hoped so. Not out of vanity, but out of hope, because believing that what we teach has blossomed in someone is what gives meaning to life. One day, putting away old things, she found a notebook. On the cover, the name of a student she never forgot, Daniel Souza, a poor boy, the son of a bricklayer, who didn't have a pencil, and who always had his head down. She remembered him well, because he was one of the few in whom she saw the spark of struggle. "Teacher, will I ever amount to something in life?" he asked once. And she answered, without hesitation, "My son, knowledge is the only inheritance that no one can take from you." She never imagined that that boy would keep those words as if they were a map. Now, so many years later, she was just the cleaning lady. But in her heart, she still carried the soul of someone who taught generations. And every time someone looked at her with disdain, Aurora thought, if they knew who I was, perhaps they would learn to look at me differently. But she never said it. Because those who have true greatness don't need to explain themselves. She simply cleaned, smiled, and said to herself, "It's not the uniform that defines me. It's what I do with my hands and my heart." And, without knowing it, destiny was already beginning to prepare the reunion that would change everything. Donna Aurora's days began before sunrise. At 5 in the morning, the alarm clock rang softly. She would get up slowly, put on her worn shoes, and carefully place her folded blue uniform on the chair. She would drink a black coffee with 2 biscuits and make the sign of the cross before leaving. Another day, Lord. Give me strength to continue being good, even when the world isn't. The bus was late, as always. The driver already knew her. "Good morning, Mrs. Aurora," he would say, smiling. And she would reply in the same gentle tone, "Good morning, my son. May God bless your day too." On the way, she watched the city awaken. Hurried people, horns honking, expensive shop windows. While the world rushed by, she simply walked slowly, with her cloth and hope in her bag. At the company, she was always the first to arrive. She would turn on the lights, open the windows, and mop the floor. The smell of disinfectant mingled with that of fresh coffee. She was the one who prepared the coffee for others, who left everything clean before the meetings began. But few knew this, few noticed. The young people arrived in a hurry, cell phones in hand and eyes glued to their watches. Some said good morning, others didn't even do that. "Careful, Grandma, don't slip there," joked a boy laughing loudly. She just smiled. "God bless you, my son," she replied. Between tables, Aurora observed. She saw the girls taking selfies in the hallway, the boys laughing at jokes about who earned more. No one imagined that this woman with slow steps had once been on the other side. She had once been the one who taught, who inspired, who shaped dreams. But she didn't feel envy. She felt pity. Because she saw in them the same mistake she had once seen in many students, believing that youth is eternal, and that the brilliance of the soul comes from what one wears, not from who one is. One morning, one of the new employees, Vanessa, spilled her coffee on her boss's report. She panicked. "Oh my God, what do I do? I'm screwed." Aurora approached calmly. "Calm down, my dear. There's a way to fix this." She took a clean cloth, dried the document, and put it out to air dry. "See, you can hardly tell." Vanessa smiled, relieved. "Thank you, Mrs. Aurora." "No need to thank me, my dear. We can always fix what seems lost," she said, with that tone of quiet wisdom that time gives. But, minutes later, she heard the group of colleagues whispering, "Poor thing, she thinks she's everyone's mother. Soon she'll be giving moral lessons." The cloth-wielding grandma. Aurora pretended not to hear, but her heart ached, because those who lived to teach feel it when kindness becomes a reason for laughter. Lunch was always in the cafeteria, alone, in a corner. She ate slowly, looking out the window. Meanwhile, the others gathered at the larger tables, laughing, showing videos, talking about trips and plans. She listened, smiled from afar, and sometimes murmured, "It's good that they're happy." But the truth is that the silence of solitude was beginning to weigh on her. Not because of the lack of conversation, but because of the lack of eye contact. The look that sees, that recognizes, that says you exist. On Fridays, the company was filled with music and laughter. It was the young people's happy hour. Aurora took advantage of the time to finish cleaning earlier and go home. But that day, fate decided to let her hear what she shouldn't. While collecting the glasses from the table, she heard a young man say, "Man, imagine working until that age, cleaning the floor." And the girl next to him added, laughing, "They say she's a widow and lives alone. She must have spent all her retirement money." Another replied, "Or she never had one." The laughter echoed. She stopped for a moment. She felt her chest tighten. But, instead of answering, she just kept cleaning. Tears fell slowly, mixing with the water in the bucket. "Lord," she whispered, "teach me not to hold grudges. Give me strength to continue being good, even when the world forgets me." In the following days, she spoke even less. Her body ached, her soul weary, but her heart remained steadfast. She had faith that every honest gesture would one day be seen, if not by human eyes, then by the eyes of God. And it was this silent faith that kept her standing, even when she seemed invisible, even when the pain was greater than her pride. Because within her, the teacher who once taught a poor boy to read still lived. And, unknowingly, that boy was already returning not as a student, but as a witness to the value the world had forgotten. Aurora didn't talk about herself. Perhaps because she knew that those who explain themselves too much are those who have never truly been heard. It was an ordinary Thursday. The clock struck 3:30 in the afternoon, and the office was full. Aurora was sweeping the floor of the main hallway, distracted, when she heard the sound of laughter. Those laughs she knew so well, low, mocking laughs, like needles pricking the soul. On the other side of the room, a group of young employees gathered near the photocopier. They had just finished a meeting and, amidst jokes, decided that the topic of the day would be her. "I bet Grandma with the mop sleeps with the mop next to her bed," said one. "And dreams she's cleaning the sky," added another, eliciting laughter. Aurora pretended not to hear, but the words didn't just resonate in her ears, they resonated in her heart. She took a deep breath and continued mopping, looking at the floor as if pretending the world had ended and everything had fallen silent. But the worst was yet to come. When she finished, she went to the cafeteria to take the mops to be washed. Inside, the same group was preparing for their afternoon snack. The conversation was loud, and the smell of coffee filled the air. She entered discreetly, placed the bucket in a corner, and began rinsing the mops. "Hey, Mrs. Aurora," shouted one of the girls, with a tone of false politeness. "Come here for a minute." Aurora turned, smiling. "Yes, my dear. We were just talking. You always work so hard, don't you?" "It's what I have to do, my dear. Work has never been a source of shame." "Oh sure," said the young man beside her. "It's just that we keep wondering. Did you study for this?" Laughter erupted before she could answer. And among the laughs, someone added, "They say she was a teacher. But look where she ended up." Time stood still. Aurora felt her legs weaken. The cloth slipped from her hands. The sound of laughter echoed like a slap. She looked at each of them not with anger, but with sadness. In the eyes of those young people, she saw ignorance dressed in pride. And even so, she managed to say, in a firm but gentle voice, "Yes, life teaches, my children. But not everyone learns." Silence. The laughter ceased for a moment. Then it returned, disguised with sarcasm. Aurora left the cafeteria slowly. The sound of the bucket hitting the floor echoed in the hallway. And as soon as she was alone, she leaned against the wall and let the tears fall silent, hot, painful. In the bathroom, she locked herself in and washed her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. The reflection showed a tired woman, with deep wrinkles, teary eyes, and a stained uniform. But inside, she knew, there was still something beautiful there. What life had taken in appearance, it had given back in wisdom. She spoke to her own reflection, in a whisper that sounded like a prayer. I know who I am, and that's enough for me. That day, when the workday ended, she stayed late. She waited for everyone to leave so she could clean without stares, without laughter. The silence of the night was the only thing that respected her. She wiped slowly, without haste. Each movement was a prayer, each drop of sweat, a memory. As she cleaned, she remembered her time as a teacher. The children's voices, the small hands raised in the classroom, the sincere laughter. She remembered Daniel, the boy with curious eyes who one day asked if he could be someone in life. And, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. She spoke to herself, as if the past could hear her. If at least one of them has learned, it was already worth it. The next morning, her body still ached, but her heart was light, because, even without knowing it, she had won. Not against the one who humiliated her but against her own shame. And that is what few achieve. Upon arriving at work, glances averted. Perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of habit, she simply smiled and said, "Good morning." No one answered, but she knew that one day they would. Time takes its toll. Time heals. Time reveals. It always reveals. In the afternoon, the director announced that the company would have a special meeting the following week. A new investor was coming. The employees began to speculate. They say he's a millionaire. I heard he's a tech genius. He's going to change everything here. Aurora listened from afar, unconcerned. For her, it didn't matter who was in charge, what mattered was what she did. But there was something different about that announcement. Something that, unknowingly, destiny was delicately orchestrating. Because the man who was coming wasn't a stranger. He was the boy with the crumpled notebook. The same Daniel Souza, now an adult, a businessman, and the owner of the company where the teacher swept the floor. That night, Aurora arrived home exhausted. She sat on the bed, took off her shoes, and stared at the ceiling. Her classmates' words echoed in her mind like cold echoes. Look where she ended up, ... But she felt no shame. She felt pride, because, even on the ground, she never stopped walking with dignity. She prayed before sleeping, Lord, help me continue to be an example, even when the world only sees appearances. And she fell asleep with a small smile, without imagining that, in a few days, the same floor she cleaned would be the stage for her victory. She cried silently, but didn't resign. She knew that those who carry the truth don't need to shout. Respect is an echo. In the days that followed, the air seemed heavier in the company. The laughter, which had previously filled the hallway, now sounded disguised. But it wasn't guilt, it was shame. Shame at looking at that woman and realizing that they had mocked someone who never responded in kind, and yet seemed greater than all of them. Aurora felt it. She didn't need to hear it to know. Silence has its own sound and she recognized it from afar. She arrived even earlier. As always, she tidied the tables, cleaned the floor, prepared the coffee. She performed her work with the same serenity. But inside her, something had changed. There was a fatigue that didn't come from her body, but from her heart. An old, deep weariness. It wasn't a desire to give up. It was a desire to be remembered not for her position, but for the story she carried. At certain moments, she would stop in front of the window and watch the sun enter through the glass. Could it be that? Has the world forgotten who I was? She thought. And then, immediately afterwards, she answered herself, it doesn't matter. I know who I am, and that's enough. One morning, while cleaning the meeting room, she overheard one of the young men say to his colleague, Dude, did you know she really was a teacher? Seriously, I found out yesterday from HR. She taught at a public school for years, and she ended up here. Yeah. It feels like punishment. Aurora pretended not to hear. But inside, an invisible tear rolled down her cheek. Not of pain, but of compassion. Because they didn't yet know that life doesn't punish. It teaches. At lunchtime, she sat alone. As always. The food was cold on her plate, and her thoughts were far away. She remembered her husband, the laughter in the kitchen, the smell of beans cooking. Everything seemed so distant, almost like a dream that time had erased. She sighed and whispered softly, "Osmer, if you only knew how different the world is these days. People don't have time to feel anymore. Only to run." And, for a moment, she felt like crying. But she held back. Crying for her was a luxury, and the strong learned to save their tears. In the hallways, her colleagues, they avoided it. No one mocked anymore, but no one spoke either. It was as if respect had come to lay heavy, uncomfortable, and deep down, she just wanted normalcy. One afternoon, while cleaning the reception area, she overheard the director on the phone. "Yes, the new investor arrives tomorrow. A big name in the sector. They say he started from the bottom, but today he's a benchmark." Aurora smiled without understanding why. That phrase "started from the bottom" seemed familiar. Perhaps because it described exactly what she had always believed, that a person's worth is not measured by their height, but by the depth of their roots. That night, when she got home, her body craved rest, but her heart craved faith. She made her black coffee and sat by the window. It was raining outside. The water lashed against the glass, as if the sky were crying for her. She opened the dresser drawer and took out the old notebook with the yellowed cover, the notebook of memories from her school days. She leafed through the pages. On one of them, the name, Daniel Souza, and right below, an essay. Children's handwriting, shaky. "When I grow up, I want to be important, but not rich, like the people on TV. I want to be someone who changes other people's lives, like Professor Aurora changed mine." Her eyes welled up with tears. She ran her fingers over the paper, like someone caressing a child she never had. And she murmured, "I hope it worked out, my boy." The next morning, Aurora woke up feeling different. The same uniform, the same coffee, the same bus. But something inside her told her the day wouldn't be the same. She couldn't explain it. It was as if time had stopped for a moment to prepare a surprise. When she arrived at the company, everything was in turmoil. Cameras, journalists, tense employees. The main entrance was decorated with flowers and banners. In the center, the director, nervous, adjusted his jacket. Aurora went unnoticed, as always. But this time, fate was about to do what no one else dared to do. Really look at her. The new owner would arrive at any moment. The employees were lined up, forcing smiles. Aurora, in the background, observed everything in silence, holding the cloth in her hands. And then, the elevator opened. The sound of the cameras began. Firm footsteps echoed. A tall man in a dark suit entered with a smile. The director approached him, shook his hand, and introduced him to the departments. But the man seemed distracted. His eyes scanned the room, as if searching for someone, until they stopped. There, in the corner, near the wall, was Aurora. In uniform, with the bucket and the cloth. His eyes lit up. He took a few steps, ignoring everyone around him. "Professor Aurora," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Silence fell over the room. Aurora looked up. For a moment, time stood still. It was him, the boy with the notebook. Daniel Souza, now a grown man, the owner of the company, with the same childlike sparkle in his eyes. She put her hand to her mouth, surprised. "My God, Daniel," he smiled, tears in his eyes. "Do you still remember me?" "How could I forget?" she replied, moved. "I taught you to read, but what you learned afterward is what brought you here." And there, before everyone, the woman who swept the floor transformed once again into the teacher who taught them to lift their heads. World. She thought nothing would change. But destiny was already silently moving forward, preparing for the day when the past would return to give thanks. And if it doesn't return, it's because it never arrived. The silence that formed inside the company seemed to have a life of its own. No one dared to move. The reporters stopped taking pictures. The director swallowed hard. And the employees, the same ones who had laughed at Aurora so many times, seemed frozen. The man in front of her was now the owner of the place. But, in Aurora's eyes, he was still the boy in the crumpled uniform, with small hands and a curious gaze. Professor, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I spent years looking for you. She put her hand to her chest, in disbelief. Looking. For me. Yes. He took a deep breath, and a tone of gratitude filled the room. When I was a child, you were the only person who believed in me. Knowledge is the only inheritance that no one can take away from you. Do you remember you telling me that? Aurora smiled, her eyes welling up with tears. How could I forget? He approached and continued. I come from a very simple family, teacher. My mother cleaned houses, and my father, well, he didn't believe much in studying. But you insisted. You said I had talent. You made me read aloud in front of the class. And that day, I discovered I could be someone. Tears began to stream down her face. The employees, motionless, listened in silence. The principal tried to hide his discomfort, but his face betrayed his astonishment. I promised myself that if I ever succeeded, I would find you, Daniel continued. And today, when I entered this building, I swear time stopped, because I saw the woman who gave me the greatest gift of my life. Cleaning the floor I walk on. Aurora lowered her eyes. Life has its twists and turns, my son. He smiled. No, teacher. Life only brought me back to repay what you did. The silence was broken when he turned to the reporters and said, this woman here was my teacher in childhood. She was the one who taught me my first words. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't even know how to sign my own name on the contract I closed today. The flashes started again, but now it wasn't about the new owner, it was about her. The cleaning lady became the center of attention. The young people who had previously mocked her lowered their heads. Vanessa, the girl who had laughed at her days before, cried softly. The boy who had called her grandma with the cloth discreetly wiped away his tears. Daniel continued firmly. This woman shouldn't be cleaning floors. She should be teaching here, teaching all of us what dignity is, what respect is, what greatness is. Aurora tried to interrupt. Don't say that, Daniel. I'm fine. He looked at her tenderly. Teacher, I've spent half my life trying to prove my worth to the world. You never needed to prove anything. The room erupted in applause. But Aurora, humble, only smiled. Her teary eyes shone under the camera lights. She took a deep breath and said calmly, I don't need applause, my son. Then what do you want? He asked. She thought for a moment, looked around, and replied, I want people to treat with respect those who do what I do, because no one is less for cleaning the floor. Yes, ma'am, said Daniel, moved. That will change today, and it did. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the company was never the same. The employees began to look at Aurora with eyes of admiration and regret. The director, visibly embarrassed, tried to approach her. Mrs. Aurora, I didn't know. She smiled, and now you know. And knowing, my son, is the first step to not repeating the same mistakes. At the end of the day, Daniel went to her again. Professor, I want you to accept a new position here. I want you to help me create a social education project for underprivileged youth. In your name. She was silent for a few seconds. She looked at the bucket, at the cloth, and then at his face. Daniel, thank you. But I want to stay where I am. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I've found peace here. Helping, caring, cleaning. It's not a punishment. It's a job like any other. She smiled serenely. I've already taught in the classrooms. Now I teach by example. He smiled too, respectfully. Then, at least let me help you with whatever you need. Just promise me one thing, she replied, that you never forget where you came from. Daniel held her hands and said, Never, teacher. Because it was there that I learned what really matters. When he left, the entire office stood up. No one ordered it, no one asked for it. The applause came spontaneously, sincerely, like a collective apology. Aurora looked at them, moved, and said only, You don't need to applaud me, just learn. The sound of applause filled the room like a prayer, and for a moment, it seemed that time had stopped, there between the past she had lived, and the present that destiny was restoring. On the way back home, Aurora looked out the bus window. The city passed by quickly, but her heart was light. Outside, the world continued as before. But inside her, something had changed. The weight of humiliation had transformed into a silent pride. She didn't need to prove anything. The world had already done that for her. And that night as she lay down, she closed her eyes and murmured, "Thank you, Lord, because time may take its time, but it never fails." And she slept peacefully. This time, not as the cleaning lady, but as the teacher who had taught even destiny itself. In the days that followed that encounter, nothing was the same again. The mocking laughter disappeared, the hushed conversations ceased, and the name Donna Aurora began to be spoken with respect and, sometimes even with a lump in the throat. The new owner, Daniel, kept his promise. He had a small plaque installed at the entrance of the company. On it, a simple phrase, engraved in gold letters, in honor of Professor Aurora, who taught the value of knowledge and humility. Aurora tried to protest, embarrassed. "Oh, my son, this is too much." Daniel just smiled. "It's not an honor, Professor, it's justice." The routine, curiously, remained the same. She still arrived early, made coffee, mopped the floor. But something invisible had changed. The greetings now came sincerely. The good mornings sounded full of gratitude. And when someone saw her cleaning, they stopped to help. That woman, who for years had been invisible, was now the heart of the company. One morning, Vanessa, the young woman who had previously laughed at her, approached shyly. "Mrs. Aurora, I wanted to apologize." Aurora looked up, serene. "Why, my daughter?" "For being so ignorant. I didn't know." "Nobody knows everything, daughter," said Aurora, smiling. "The important thing is wanting to learn," Vanessa cried. Aurora embraced her with the same affection she once gave to so many students. And in that embrace, the weight of guilt turned into learning. The social project proposed by Daniel began to take shape. He asked Aurora to help coordinate the name and purpose. She chose the title, Roots of Knowledge, because she believed that knowledge only flourishes when it has the humility to take root. And every month, students from public schools visited the company to listen to lectures, study, and learn about the value of work. And there she was, the woman in the simple uniform, telling her story, with the same sparkle in her eyes of someone who never gave up. "I cleaned many floors in my life," she said, in front of the children. "But no sparkle is as beautiful as that of someone with a clean heart." The children applauded her. And among them, there was always someone who remembered Daniel, the curious boy who one day believed because someone made him believe. Time passed. Aurora grew a little older, but seemed lighter and lighter. One day, Daniel went to visit her at home. She lived in a small 2-story house, full of plants and old photographs. "Teacher, why did you never want to stop working?" he asked. She smiled. "Because work makes me feel alive, my son. But now you could rest, enjoy life." "And who says I'm not enjoying it?" she replied, laughing. "I wake up early, watch the sunrise, and give thanks. There's no greater wealth than that." Daniel was silent for a moment. There was something in her serenity that disarmed him, a peace that money never brought. The following week, the company held a small celebration in honor of her birthday. Aurora arrived and found all the employees gathered, smiling. In the center of the room, a simple cake with colorful candles and a handwritten sign, "Happy Birthday, Mrs. Aurora, for teaching us the value of each step, each gesture, and each pure soul." She cried, not out of vanity, but because she understood finally that everything she had lived through had meaning. The pain, the contempt, the loneliness, nothing was in vain. Everything served to show that love and dignity are never lost, they just wait for the right moment to be recognized. At the end of the party, before blowing out the candles, Aurora said a few words. Her voice was gentle, but firm. "My children." She called them all that, as she did with her students. "If one day you pass by someone humble, remember me. Not everyone who cleans the floor is small. Sometimes, They are the ones who support the roof that protects you. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that touches deeply, the kind that is born of respect. And, when she blew out the candles, the applause came naturally, as if the whole world were saying thank you together. That night, back home, Aurora looked at herself in the mirror and murmured, "I won." Not with shouts, not with riches, but with the truth. And she slept smiling, knowing that the love she gave on, that the world ignored, had returned, multiplied. She lost the respect of others for a time, but she never lost her own. And that's what saved her. How many times have you judged someone without knowing the story their silence carries? How many times have you passed by a simple person and thought they had nothing to teach, just because they didn't have the glitter of clothes, the title on their badge, or the hurried manner of those who think they are great? Donna Aurora was the portrait of so many invisible women who live among us. Women who clean, who care, who sustain the world, but who are rarely looked in the eye. And yet, they remain steadfast. Without shouting, without justifying themselves, without demanding recognition. Life has a curious way of revealing the value of people. It takes time, but it never fails. And when time decides to act, it does so delicately, showing that true brilliance is not in those who climb high, but in those who remain whole, even when left down below. Aurora taught this with her own life. She proved that there is no such thing as small work. What exists is people too small to understand the value of others' efforts. She showed that dignity isn't about the position you hold, but about the way you walk, even when the ground is dirty. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. Respect isn't asked for, it's cultivated. And whoever cultivates respect, one day reaps recognition. Time may have taken her youth, her husband, her old dreams. But what Aurora carried within, kindness, patience, faith, not even fate could take away. Because true greatness is silent. It doesn't need applause, nor a stage. It lives in simple gestures, in the right words, and in the souls that know how to serve with love. So, if one day you cross paths with a woman like Donna Aurora in uniform, with a tired smile and slow steps, stop, look into her eyes. And remember, you may be standing before someone who was once the foundation of many people's dreams. Someone who taught the world, before the world learned to respect her. Because humility has never been weakness. It's the strength of someone who has already won and no longer needs to prove it. Comment, like, and follow the channel. Follow our channel and become part of this community of women who overcome the difficulties and adversities that fate brings. Every day, real stories of strength, forgiveness, and rebirth. Because every woman has a story, and sometimes, what the world calls weakness is just the name it gives to the courage to keep going.